Over the last week, a bunch of information has been revealed for a few of the Nightfarers that we didn't know much about before. We now know pretty much the full repertoire for all 8 classes. So today, let's break down everything we know about all 8 Nightfarers so far, along with how they're likely to play, so that you can determine your favourites ahead of the launch of Elden Ring Nightreign. Now, I imagine most people probably already know the Wylder, Guardian, Duchess, and Recluse pretty well by now, and I have covered them extensively in my previous videos, so I will skim over them later on in the video for those that are still somehow in the dark, but let's start with the more juicy ones for now, starting with the Raider. The Raider may very well be the most powerful character, but at the same time, there's something I hate about him. Please bear with me whilst I simultaneously sing his praises and also go on a rant about why I think he's so badly designed, and then you can roast me in the comments for my terrible takes. First up, let's take a look at his 3 abilities at face value without any bias or judgment. His passive ability, Fighter's Resolve, means he cannot be knocked down whilst using the Retaliate skill. His character skill is the aforementioned Retaliate, which allows him to stomp on the ground twice, or if he tanks a strong enough hit during Retaliate, his second smash will be replaced with a powerful punch for massive physical and poise damage, staggering all but the most powerful bosses in one hit. And finally, his ultimate art is Totem Stellar. He slams the ground, dealing massive AoE damage, and raises a huge climbable totem for allies to perch atop, providing a safe haven from intense fights and a vantage point for ranged players, whilst also granting a damage buff to all allies within range of the totem. He sounds insanely powerful, right? What is not to love? And mechanically, yes, I agree, he's absolutely incredible. He may well be my favourite class. But I also feel like for 2 different reasons, his design is a bit of a cop-out. Firstly, his passive ability is just an extension of his character skill. Now, I'm not saying he needs to be any stronger, obviously he doesn't, but I feel like his passive should just automatically be a part of his character skill. That's literally all it does, it doesn't need to be a separate thing. And then his passive could be something like, he gains an extra 25% poise, or something like that, as he's such a big tanky boy. And secondly, talking of his character skill, I do love that it requires some actual skill to use, like you need to be good with your parry timings and make sure you're activating it at the correct time to pull off the Retaliate, but it is so similar to the Wylder's Onslaught stake. It's a big punch with big stagger damage. Could it not be something a little bit more unique? TLDR, he's going to be one of the strongest characters, probably my favourite, but I feel like his design could have been a bit more unique. Next up is Ironeye. There's more than a few people that I know who personally are extremely happy to have a dedicated archer on the team, and his passive ability, Eagle Eye, will passively increase the drop rate from all enemies for all players. This is a permanent, team-wide, map-wide effect. Now, I don't believe actual specific percentages have been revealed, so exactly how powerful this is yet to be seen. Like, is it a 2% increase? Is it a 20% increase? But regardless, having a permanent team-wide global increase to drop rates can be pretty significant regardless of the percentage. And even though it is potentially the only luck-based skill of any Nightfarer, it could still come in really clutch just having that kind of ability on your team. Then the Ironeye's 2 other unique abilities are his character skill Marking. This is a fast dagger attack that will pierce an enemy and leave them with a mark. The mark lasts for 10 seconds and makes enemies take increased damage whilst it is active. The cooldown for the ability is actually much shorter than 10 seconds, allowing you to chain this multiple times on bosses, and it will stack, increasing the damage taken by that enemy further and further with each application. This makes him very, very powerful in single target for taking down bosses. But wait, there's more. Finally, the Ironeye can use the supersonic arrow as his ultimate, which allows him to fire a powerful arrow that pierces all defenses and enemies and deals significant damage. That's right, the ability can pierce through multiple enemies, making it an effective option for crowd control as long as you are good with your positioning. So he has a great AoE ability and a great single target ability. Please note that the supersonic arrow, like most ultimates, does require you to charge it up before it fires. So there is a little bit of anticipation involved there if you want to be able to hit multiple things at once, but it doesn't leave you vulnerable because, as with charged ultimates, you are invincible whilst it's charging. Now, for the first of the two Nightfarers that we previously knew very little about, let's talk about the Executor, or the Executor, depends on how it's supposed to be pronounced, I guess. But the Executor is a katana-wielding, parry-focused blend of samurai and shinobi, taking much inspiration from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. Precise parries and deflections will form a core basis of the Executor's mechanics, with strings of multi-combo parries being all but confirmed by the trailers. Not too much is known about the Executor yet, aside from the short glimpses we've seen in the trailers, but we can make some pretty educated guesses on what the passives and skills will be, and if certain Japanese gaming news sites are to be believed, we may actually know what the Executor's abilities are. Now, I don't know if this has yet been officially confirmed, but it has come from gaming news sites, so I don't think they would just lie for the sake of it. And it would make sense for the abilities of the Executor to be focused around parries and deflects, either making them easier to perform or making them more powerful, something like that. And as I say, a few sources do suggest that we already know what the skills and abilities of the Executor will be. The skill is supposedly the Bewitched Sword, which will allow you to unsheath your enchanted sword, completely deflecting and nullifying an enemy's attacks. And this also hints that there may be a Sir Alon skin for the Executor, as the boss soul for Sir Alon in Dark Souls 2 grants you the Bewitched Alon sword. If that character skill is true, it sounds like a bit of a letdown. I would expect it to deal damage as well, not just nullify an attack. So hopefully there's a bit more to it than what these journalists are saying, but we'll see. And finally, this one seems less believable to me, but God, I hope it's true. The ultimate art is apparently the ability to transform yourself into a primordial crucible beast, which just sounds absolutely insane. So that's everything we believe we know so far about the Executor. If the ultimate art is to be believed, I am really excited to delve into the Executor's storylines and quest lines, because I need to know how that came about and how that works, because you know there will be lore behind that. And before we touch on the Revenant, yes, I'm going to keep you in suspense for just a little bit longer, let's quickly touch on the other classes again for anyone somehow completely out of the loop. So for these four, we'll just do a super quick rundown of their skills and abilities for anyone who has forgotten before we finally talk about the Revenant. So the Wylder's passive ability is Sixth Sense, which allows them to cheat death a single time, and this refreshes each time you rest at a site of grace. The character skill is Claw Shot, which has an incredibly quick cooldown. In fact, you can pretty much just spam it to your heart's content, and that launches your grappling claw to pull small enemies towards you or to boost yourself towards big enemies, and you can even use it to maneuver around the terrain very, very quickly. And finally, Onslaught Stake, which again is very similar to the Raider's Charged Retaliate attack, in that it delivers a single powerful attack that will deal tremendous physical and poise damage. Next up, we have my personal favourite from the closed beta test, the Guardian. His passive ability will allow you to plant your feet on the ground and brace with your shield for an even more powerful guard stance inaccessible to anyone else. His character skill is Whirlwind, which is a small AoE that will whip up a wind-churning cyclone, dealing decent damage and throwing smaller enemies into the air. And finally, his ultimate art is Wings of Salvation. You will leap up into the air and then dive back down again, slamming into the ground, dealing massive damage to enemies in an AoE area. Because of the large AoE size, this is fantastic for rezzing your fallen teammates. And if you didn't know, there's actually a bit of nuance to using Wings of Salvation. If you just press triangle and R2 to use it normally, you'll just fly up, you'll fly down, you'll slam into the ground. However, if you hold it, you will also give nearby players a defensive buff. However, doing so will fully deplete your ultimate gauge, whereas if you just press it and just use the offensive side of things, it will only consume half your gauge, making it usable again far more quickly. So if you do want to use the Guardian, make sure you keep that in mind and use the charged or uncharged versions depending on what the situation requires. Next up, as for the Duchess, her passive ability is the ability to dodge repeatedly. Obviously, it's not infinite, but she can dodge far quicker than anyone else, and she can chain dodges together. Her character skill is Restage, one of the most powerful abilities in the game, especially because of how quick the cooldown is. This will allow you to repeat the last few seconds of damage dealt to foes, so great to use just after a riposte or someone else's ultimate, something like that. And her ultimate art is Finale, which will allow you to make yourself and nearby allies invisible. So be careful using this, because enemies won't think you've just completely disappeared if you're in combat. They'll know you're still there, they just won't know where you are. So if you are facing off against an enemy with particularly devastating AoE abilities, they will use them more often whilst trying to find you before you become visible again. And finally, the Recluse. Definitely the hardest one to get your head around, but very powerful when you learn how to use her. Her passive ability, Elemental Defense, will allow you to replenish FP every time you use an uncharged magic cocktail on something. That goes for enemies and allies alike. Each time you use this on an enemy or an ally that has been affected by a particular element, either fire, magic, lightning, or holy, you will restore some FP and you will store the charge of that respective element. Once you have 3 charges saved, the next time you trigger it, you will use the magic cocktail. And this can have dozens and dozens of potential uses, depending on how many charges of fire, magic, lightning, and holy you have respectively. So I believe she will probably have the highest skill ceiling of any class in the game. And when you learn which magic cocktails are the best, she'll be absolutely devastating. And finally, her ultimate art is Soul Blood Song. This will apply blood sigils to all enemies in the nearby area, which will restore both health and FP to all Nightfarers who attack them. Really good for sustained engagements. And now finally, let's talk about what little we currently know about the Revenant. This is the class the least is known about. All we do know for sure at the moment is that the Revenant is a summoner who uses spirit ashes. And as I have already confirmed in my last Nightreign news update video a few months ago, Junior Ishizaki already confirmed in an interview at the end of last year that the Revenant will use the giant skeleton torso spirit ash as their main form of attack. There's lots of speculation around supporting mechanics. Will this be the only summon? Will you be able to swap it out for others? Will this giant skeleton torso also be supported by others, like the skeletal spearmen or the skeletal archers? At the moment, all that has been confirmed is the giant skeleton torso and the fact that the Revenant's gameplay will focus around this spirit ash. People believe from various screenshots, etc., that they have also determined the Revenant's starting weapons, which are the scythe and the harp bow. But that is all we know about the Revenant so far for definite. The rest of it is unfortunately still just speculation and guesswork. So hopefully there will be a final character review before launch soon, where we will get all the rest of the details remaining for the Executor and the Revenant. But for now, my friends, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.